Hi, everybody. Every year, around this time of year, I like to do a full layout tour. And I'm going to walk you all the way around the layout from the southernmost point to the northernmost point to just show you what the whole layout kind of looks like and how it all comes together. I do recommend that you go back and watch the full layout tour videos from the last few years that I've been doing these to see what sort of progress has been made year by year. I've named my layout the Great Lakes Eastern because I model primarily the eastern part of Michigan, which is the Great Lakes state. That's where I came up with the name years ago. It's an HO scale model railroad that consists of two layouts, layout A and B. A being the larger one, the one we'll see first, and B is actually the original layout, which is why it still exists. A is DCC controlled with Digitrax, and layout B is a conventional DC powered layout. The layout is a modular design, which means every section comes apart and can be moved and has been moved in the past. The layout, when it's fully assembled, comes in at 21.5 feet wide by 31.5 feet in length. That, by the way, is layout A. Layout B comes in at 5 foot wide by 15 feet long. Layout A, the bigger layout, the DCC powered layout, the layout we'll be focusing on first, is actually divided up into two large scenic sections. One section is from southeast Michigan, the Dearborn area, up to northeast Michigan, the Alpena area, okay? And the second section is Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and then it crosses the border into Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and it features the International Bridge and the Soo Locks. You'll see that coming up. Layout B was added into the overall story of the Great Lakes Eastern Mono Railroad later on in time. It was originally the Great Lakes Eastern. It was going to be the layout. But there were some decisions I had to make in the past that had me start designing and building layout A, the new version of the Great Lakes Eastern. But I didn't want to tear up what I already had, so hence now I have two layouts. No big deal. But with layout B, it will continue our journey from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, northward to the Agua Canyon Park. And the reason for this is when I was very young, probably no more than 4, my family rode on that tour train. And it left an impression. And as you know, many of us model things from our past, things that had left impressions on us, places we've been, and would like to remember, maybe even just in model form, if need be. So that's why a lot of the scenes that you're going to see on this layout exist. That's why a lot of what I modeled is what I modeled. It's an extension of me and my past. So we're going to start walking around the layout from this point here, which is the southernmost position on the layout, and we're going to start going around that way in a northward direction. Work our way around, back up through there, and then show you the Sault Ste. Marie segment, which is off on the other side, and then finally layout B, which is way down in the distance. So in front of you are the Norfolk Southern shops that are located in Melvindale, Michigan, just south of Dearborn. These are modeled after real places. The neighborhood was mimicked after the way the neighborhood looked back in probably about 2008 or 2009. The neighborhood is still there today, but the houses and stuff look a little different. As with everything, it changes over time. So this is the biggest engine facility on the layout. You'll notice behind it there a highway overpass. That's I-75 as it snakes up through the Detroit area. There's an intermodal / transport area behind and a yard out front. There we have a FedEx. One of the Menards buildings. I have many on this layout. This is also one right here. This is their switch tower. And we're also graced by a passing train. As the train passes, I'll take a moment and mention the different railroads that I model, the different railroads that fell in the region that I model, which again is southeast Michigan, the Dearborn area, up to northeast Michigan, the Alpena area, and then Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, crossing into Canada, and then from there finally up to the Algoa Canyon Park. So there's a lot of railroads that fall in that region, like Canadian National, Canadian Pacific, Chesapeake and Ohio, Conrail, Norfolk Southern, Wisconsin Central, Sioux Line, Algoma Central, Grand Trunk, Huron and Eastern, Lake State Railway, Central Michigan, the Great Lakes Central Railroad, not to be confused with the Great Lakes Eastern, which is the name of the layout. And I'm sure there's a couple other stragglers I might be forgetting that I'll find along the way. Oh yeah, as I'm looking, I see Chessie System, a DT&I locomotive, Detroit and Mackinac eventually. So yeah, oh, there's CSX, a lot of different railroads. Also, I've told you the region, the era that I model is, I try to stick to this. I fluctuate a little bit here and there, but it's about 1985 through the early 2000s. So I don't know, 2005 to maybe 2008. I try to stick within that era, but it fluctuates here and there. It's a model railroad. The number one rule is, it's your railroad, it's your rules, and remember to have fun. All right, so continuing through our Dearborn section, this right here on the corner is the whole reason that my layout starts in Dearborn. This is a cutout of the Henry Ford Museum. And the reason I wanted this is so I could include prototypically a large articulated steam engine. Well, about the only one we have in Michigan is Chesapeake and Ohio's 1601 Allegheny that I have on display inside the museum. There might be a glare because of the plexiglass, which obviously has to be there to protect the building since it's right on the corner. There you see the DeWitt Clinton, a replica of the DeWitt Clinton, sitting next to the Allegheny, just like it does in the real museum. There's a few people in there. There's a lot more stuff, details and such to add to this museum, but everything's little by little. You see the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile in there, which is prototypical. And this locomotive does run. I can back it out of the museum, and there are many videos of this locomotive pulling mainly excursion trains. There is an early video where I took up a challenge and to see what single locomotive I had that would pull the most cars. Well, the Allegheny was the locomotive, and I pulled 50 cars with just the Allegheny around the entire layout twice with no issue. All right, let's continue north. And here we see another Menards building. Obviously, I probably bought it at Menards, right? This is an O scale building on an HO scale layout. So in my opinion, the Menards buildings are a little small, which is great because they only offer the Menards building in O scale. And since Menards are very large buildings, it looks to me, anyway, just fine on an HO scale layout. In fact, the garden center that I have created here, that's all HO. And it looks just fine next to the Menards building. Now, I will say the vehicles that are in the parking lot, these are currently 1/64th scale. So, like Hot Wheels Matchbox size. And that kind of helps the transition between the O scaleness, mainly of the figures, which aren't too big, honestly. But it kind of helps blend and transition the O scale into the HO, and I think it looks just fine. Alright, so let's swing northward towards Flint. You can see over there in the corner there's a cemetery, cell tower, swinging back past the Menards. And here we have the truck assembly plant, which is on Van Slyke Road, right here, in Flint, Michigan. Definitely a big player, a big customer for the Canadian National Railroad, and at one time the Grand Trunk Railroad. And as of right now, there's even a train sitting out here waiting. This scene has been constantly getting little details added to it over the last few years to make it look more and more impressive as an industry. More detailed, of course. There's the loading area where they put the new trucks onto the rail cars, onto the auto racks. In fact, that's the train that's out here waiting. Got some of the auto carriers parked there. Double track main line out here. Most of the layout uses a gray blend ballast because that's prototypical. But this stretch through Flint, the ballast is a darker color. At least it was when I photographed and researched the area to make this scene. Here you can kind of see the seam where two of the modules come together. Gradually I'm hiding the seams with scenery and such. So in some areas you can't even see where the seam is. It transitions from one module to the next, like right in here. I think it's disguised pretty good. Here we have another Menards building, their dollar store. Little office right here. I don't have signals on the layout yet. That's a future endeavor. But I do have the crossing signals, if you will. None of them are wired up yet. But they are present on all of the grade crossings where they should be. And then here in the corner is a model of my house. Scratch built. We are in the basement of this house right now filming this video. And no, my house is not located where it is on the layout in real life. But this corner just seemed like a good place to put it. Kind of a little scene of its own. And then that transitioned us to Duran. So we actually had to head westward here. This is the Union Station in Duran. Here's the diamond that's in place today. Keep in mind that none of the scenes in this layout, and therefore the layout as a whole, is not complete. Probably never will be. This is Kit Bash from a Walther's Station kit. Nice Woodland Scenics flag. I have a few of those around. Most of the scenery on the layout is from Woodland Scenics, but there's some from JTT, Scenic Express, maybe a couple other, maybe Walther's and Bachman as well. Nice brass radio tower here that I bought at the Lansing Train Show 2 years ago. Here on the fascia is a picture of the actual Union Station. And you can see the radio tower in the background. And here is the model form. And normally right here is a caboose, but it's currently on the GT train. It's parked over in front of the assembly plant. But here's a picture of the prototype of what it would look like if I had the caboose sitting there right now. From from Duran, we're going to head north towards Owosso, Michigan. So right here is just a farm, just a generic farm to transition us. A lot of countryside and forest land in Michigan, and I definitely wanted to model that. Because I feel a lot of model railroads lack the open running spaces. Here's a station and a water tower. They don't represent anything specific as of right now. But this little narrow gauge K27 is a replica of the K27 number 464 that's at Huckleberry Railroad, just north of Flint, Michigan. And at some point, I'd like to actually create Huckleberry Railroad, possibly on a shelf of some sort right up here, and have it be its own separate thing. Here's some of the Woodland Scenics trailers. Everybody gets a kick out of the one in the back because it has the TV effect in there. Here we have a lift-out panel so that I can access the tracks and the scenery way back in there. Because even though you may not be able to tell it on the video, that's about a 6-foot span from here to that corner. This is Owosso, Michigan. Here the red buildings are the Great Lakes Central Engine Facility. And right next to that, on the same grounds, is the Steam Railroading Institute, where we have Berkshire 1225 Pure Marquette steam locomotive, of course, made very popular by the movie and the book Polar Express. That is a Walther's turntable. It does rotate. I obviously had to model that. In fact, as of the making of this video, I have a Ann Arbor caboose coming that they use on their Polar Express train every Christmas. So that'd be fun. Anytime I can add something prototypical to the layout, I'm all for it. Winding through here is the Shiawassee River. A lot of trees from various manufacturers. A lot more farmland. We have a nice large wheat field out front, which actually starts back here. These are all made from GTT. Comes on around to here. Then we have a cornfield across the way. Some grain silos, grain distribution back here, feed store. Not modeled after any one particular feed store, but it represents many, many, many of the grain elevators in Michigan. Now, if you travel that way, this is actually a Y. There's two Ys right here. You're looking at one, and you could probably obviously see it. There's tracks here, here, and here. Well, there's another one opposite that, where I can turn around the full train. If you head that way, you're going to head north from the Owosso area towards Bay City, which is on the other side of that overpass. But if you go this way, you're going to head more of a northwest direction towards Dow Chemical. So here we have the tank car loading or unloading area, cooling pond in front of it. Nice Dow Chemical logo on there, so you know where you are. Rail yard out front. This rail yard actually takes the place of many rail yards. It could be the Genesee yard in Saginaw. It could be the yard in front of Dow. It could be the yard for Sault Ste. Marie, which is actually on the other side of this backdrop. This divides the southern section of the layout from the northern or the Sault Ste. Marie section. We'll actually come back to that section in a little bit. It could also be used as the yard for Duran, which is right back there from where I'm standing. Here's the control center. It's covered with a bag to protect it from any kind of plumbing issues from above, and just to kind of hide it. Makes it look like it's inside of a hill. At some point, I might cover it completely with some sort of scenery. You've seen that there are Menards buildings and some Woodland Scenics buildings on the layout. I'd say most of the buildings that were from Walthers. In fact, almost every structure in front of me right here is Walthers. They make a lot of good modern kits. All right, so let's go up through there to Bay City and continue the tour from there. All right, so that's where we started in Dearborn. Headed up to Flint, then went to Duran, which is over there on the corner, pardon the mess in the distance. Then from there, went up to Owosso, which is down in that corner. Dow Chemical up there in the distance. And then under the overpass, which, like I said earlier, was I-75. Well, in this scene, it's also I-75, just in a different spot. This is I-75 as it passes near Bay City. Here's more of the cornfields. Hay bales in the back with some deer. You can see there's a lot of tracks here going on because there's yard leads, passing sightings, the tracks for the reversing Y. This is a small representation of the Winona Yard in Bay City. And then from here, we're going to head north along the Lake Huron shoreline to Alpena, which is right over there. Today it's the Lake State Railway from this point on northward. And back prior to 92, it was the Detroit and Mackinac Railway. So we're going to pass by a couple of natural gas derricks that do exist in the mid-Michigan area. We don't drill for oil here, but we do drill for natural gas. More trees on the end here. I need a lot more trees on this layout because this should be fully wooded. But scenery to me is part of the fun part of the layout or the project, hobby. If I can find my words here. You can see more of the hay field that's been cut and baled. Time of year on the layout is like mid-July to very early October. So you'll see as we get to the northern part of the layout that the trees are in fall color, but the southern part, they're still green because they would turn in the north before the south. So, you know, having hay already baled and also pumpkins in the same layout, it kind of makes sense because you got to stretch your imagination just a little bit to fit in that time period. Got a farm here. High tension power lines. As of right now, this is the only place in the layout where I have actual power lines. Because I'm afraid if I did any of them out here on the other power poles, that I probably would hit them as I'm reaching into the layout, retrieving trains or working on scenery or whatever. So for now, they're just back there. And I think they look pretty cool against that backdrop. I'm not sure if that's, in fact, it's probably not going to be the permanent backdrop. But that's something that I just put up there. It's bulletin board paper from Hobby Lobby. And I think it looks all right. You know, the backdrops are not much more than just plain blue plywood or foam board. And overall, that's fine because they're not the main player of the layout. The trains and the scenery, that's the star of the show. So the backdrop work will be slow, but little by little, I'll probably enhance them with some kind of photographic. Here's the U.S. Gypsum facility, which is just south of Owosso. Today, it's not rail served, although it once was. The facility still exists. They have added a spur within the last couple of years, heading out to Alabaster, Michigan. So something is rail served. It's just not this exact facility here, unless they have opened operations, and I'm just not aware. But I modeled it back when it still had rail service. Now we're heading into Owosso. Got a Feral Gas here. Taco Bell, another Menards building. I like some of the earlier Menards buildings because the lighting on them, the LEDs, were not as bright and intense as they are on today's models. And that just, to me, looked a little better. The house back there is from Woodland Scenics. There's a Walther's gas station that I turned into a Marathon gas station. Now here's remnants of the old Detroit and Mackinac Railway. So in the 90s and very early 2000s, a couple of the structures still existed as the transition was happening from the Detroit and Mackinac to the Lake State Railway. Specifically, the roundhouse was one of the last buildings to come down. Here you can see that it's partially boarded up. Everything's fenced off. But it is still partially usable on my layout. I have an old Detroit Mackinac caboose. And hopefully at some point this year I'll be obtaining a Detroit and Mackinac locomotive. We have a nice beach scene out front. Campground over here, which also has access to the beach, so that's really nice. This area of the layout is neat because the train goes to the back of the modules. You know, on many model railroads, the track is out front, like it had been over that way, the areas that we've seen. But in this section, it goes back, so that adds some interest. All the scenery is in front of you, and the trains are in the background. Might as well take a quick peek at the Mackinac Bridge, one of Michigan's primary icons, and a model of the Edmund Fitzgerald going underneath it. That was a 3D wood puzzle kit bought at some shop in Mackinac City years ago. And the freighter's a paper kit, like I may have mentioned. Here's the roadside inn that you see on a lot of different layouts. Along US 23, heading north to Alpena, you see a lot of old diners like this. So I thought this would fit here just perfect. Then we get into the forest area. Another cell tower. A couple dinosaurs. Now the dinosaurs on the hill are not necessarily just there for a laugh. They represent Dinosaur Gardens, which is in Osneek, Michigan, where they have a bunch of cement figurized dinosaurs sculpted to scale that you can walk through there and kind of learn about dinosaurs. They have a putt-putt and ice cream shop, gift shop, picnic area. Neat place to check out. And now we're getting into Alpena. Now the Menards building, you can see how bright the Arby's is as compared to the Taco Bell, as I had mentioned. The LEDs on these buildings are very intense nowadays. Nice Culver's kit. My daughter picked out, not my doctor. We had the Bayview Park out here. Got some people playing basketball. Lady pushing a stroller. This is the band shell where they have concerts in the summer months. At some point I need to get some figures sitting there on the hill, because I have people at the playground and I have the food vendors there and a porta potty. So something must be going on, right? Here's the marina. Another large Woodland Scenics flag. The boardwalk that me and my family walk out on a lot. We visit Alpena a lot. One of the reasons it's on the layout. The lighthouse here. This doesn't represent the lighthouse in Alpena. It represents many different lighthouses in northeast Michigan. Some actually look like this, some not as much, but I really like this kit. It's a Cabri kit, and so I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to put that here, because again, it represents many lighthouse. This is where the lighthouse stands in Alpena, right out here on the mouth of the Thunder Bay River. So I figured, why not? Some kayakers. Got a bridge. There's a hydroelectric dam behind there. So the river level is higher under the railway bridge than it is under the road bridge. There's downtown. A couple of businesses that are truly there. We have the Save-A-Lot. We have Scoops ice cream on the corner. I forget what that middle one is. I think it's called the Center or something like that. There's a bunch of little businesses and restaurants and such there. The Dairy Queen that's on Chisholm. It's not in this exact spot, but it's on the right street, at least on my layout. Same with the Culvers. That's not actually where it is in Alpena, but we like the building, so we put it there. Water tower. Alpena Power Plant. Lake State Railway shops in the background, which are still there. Another small Y. This one's not wired up, but there is an actual Y there in Alpena. More woods up there. There's a cabin tucked down in there. I don't know if you can see it very well, but that's the idea. It's a cabin tucked in the woods. Coal piles out front, delivered by freighter, Great Lakes Freighter. And you've probably seen, I'm showing you the back of one right now, or the stern, But you've probably seen now in many shots this freighter over here. And we'll talk about that one in a minute. This is a cement carrier named the Alpena, just like the city. This is made from a Dumas kit. I really like the way this came out. It's not completely finished, but I think it looks pretty good as far as how it looks thus far. This industry is Lafarge Cement. It's supposedly the largest cement plant in North America, or at least it was in the era that it's representing here. The front of the freighter. I love these freighters. I'm just as much a freighter enthusiast as I am a train enthusiast, so I get a kick out of that. And being able to model them on my layout was an absolute must. Quarry back there for the limestone and such that are needed for cement production. Fishing area out front here. Many people ask what I use for water. I use a high gloss Mod Podge, several layers of it, and I think it looks pretty good. I went that way because there's so much water on my layout that I needed an economical choice. And this is the end of the first segment of layout 1. As I told you before, there's 2. There's a section that goes from Dearborn way over there all the way around and this way and up to Alpena. And the second section is Sault Ste. Marie, and there's a little peek of it there. But we're going to go over there and continue the tour from there. And why do I have 2 segments of the layout like this? Well, as I kind of mentioned earlier, because I want to. Because there were places I enjoyed going growing up and still do, and I just wanted to model them. So here we are in Sault Ste. Marie. We're on the Michigan side, the U.S. side. This is the canal that goes to the power plant, which is downriver of the Soo Locks, which you'll see here in a moment. Trucking distribution area right here. This is a scratch-built version of the International Bridge. The bridge is like 17 feet long. And the bridges out front are the railway bridges. The lift bridge is a custom model railroads product, CMR product. The double bascule is made out of 2 Walthers bascule bridge kits, which at some point I'll possibly make to operate. Some Atlas Warren truss bridges. And then there's the swing bridge, Walther spring bridge here. All prototypical. And then for the highway bridge, the arch sections, I used Walther's double track arch bridges to create those. Everything else is scratch built. The road deck is made out of paneling. The fencing is a Walther's, combination of a Walther's N-Line and L product. Some of it's just pine, dowels, you name it. A lot of time went into this guy. And then in front of you there are 2 of the Soo Locks. There were 4 Soo Locks during the era of my layout. Today, this section here where my aisleway, my access is, they're actually they're taking out the Davis and the Sabin locks, and they're going to build a new lock that mirrors this lock here, which is the Poe lock. And that freighter that's sitting in it is completely scratch built, mainly out of pine and then sheet styrene. And to save money for my sheet styrene, I used for sale signs. And the first lock there that's currently at a lower level, the Lake Huron level, if you will, that's the MacArthur lock. I'm going to walk over here and kind of show you the freighter a little closer up. The boom crane on there is made out of a Walther's bridge crane kit. But yeah, the hull is completely wood, made out of pine, 1x3 or 1x4. The deck is hardboard. The railing on the side is made out of chicken wire. I got a few of different flags there of different nations. I need to find more, because in the actual Sulaks there's a whole string of flags that fly for the different nations that pass through the locks. It's a model of the Paul R. Tregurtha, the largest lake freighter currently on the Great Lakes, 1,000-footer. A lot of fun to build. I really like the way it came out. All right. So we're going to cross the International Bridge. And there's a lift bridge, double bascule. This is the rapids, the transition. The whole reason the locks exist in Sault Ste. Marie is because Lake Superior is about 21 feet higher in elevation than Lake Huron. So this is where the freighters transition between the two lake levels. And also in that area are the rapids, which was where the river naturally flows from Lake Superior down to Lake Huron. We have an island right here. We're on the Canadian side right now. The border is right about here, right about where that car is. He's about to cross into the U.S. Okay, this canal here would lead to the Canadian lock. And we got a tour boat there heading towards the lock that you don't see, but it's in the distance. The red structure, that's an emergency swing gate that closes off the lock if there's a need for urgent repair. And now we're in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. We have Steelton Yard on the corner. A few tracks for the locomotives. But the biggest thing on this side is Algoma Steel. Big industry. Starts way down there. There's a rolling mill. Another freighter. This is made from a Sylvan kit. This one I named the Atabay after my daughters. This one also has the plexiglass is here, obviously, to protect it. Sorry, it's a little streaked and smeared, but you can see inside this freighter where there's loads of iron ore that are being unloaded by this bridge crane and deposited out here. There's also rail cars back there with ore in them being fed up into the blast furnace. Coke oven. It has its own power plant, which this is the Menards building. And a little warehouse of some sort there. Here's the Algoma Central Agua Canyon passenger cars. There's a couple of them here. They do have, or did have, a regular passenger service as well. That was not a tour train. It was just for the locals. And it was usually a short train like this. Just a baggage car and a couple of passenger cars behind it. That's a steam generator car from Rapido. It has lights on it and does make sound when I wave the wand over it. And that brings us to the end of layout A. So now let's take a look at layout B. All right, so now we're at the back of Algoma steel. Okay, and that's the end of that segment of the layout. Over here, we're back to Alpena again. But we're going to continue our journey north into Canada, out of Sault Ste. Marie. So over here we had Algoma steel, but on layout B, the original layout, the DC powered layout, and there you can see a couple of good old trusty Tech 2s powering the two main lines here. This is St. Mary's paper, which sadly no longer exists, but it did during my era. The houses on the end, and in fact that whole neighborhood, it was all scratch built. One of those houses is the house that this whole layout, well, layout B anyway, started in. All scratch built. Sorry about the shakies right here. Another yard. You have an engine shop on this one, since there wasn't room on layout A. Snow plow. This is all more of the paper plant. Got the wood, pulpwood yard, log yard. A lot of Algoma Central, Wisconsin Central, Sioux Line presence. Got neighborhood back here. That house is a Menards building. I wanted to get that so I'd have a way to indicate when the layout was powered on. Nice house on the corner. We have a train coming. This is a Huron Central locomotive. Found that at the Novi train show this year. Again, this layout is modular, just like layout A, which is right there. There's a small aisleway between them. Combine the two layouts, make the entire model railroad about 38 feet long. There's the Montreal River trestle and power dam, hydroelectric dam, which is prototypical. Now, this layout, the entire stretch of the Algoma Central is double track. The prototype is only single track, but originally the entire Great Lakes Eastern Model Railroad was going to be double track. But I changed my mind at one point when I started building layout A. And the northern sections over there are just single track, just like the prototype. Now this module is special here. This scene actually is not in Canada at all, but the track underneath is. But this is our place in northern Michigan. And in that shed, if you look through some of my videos, in that shed is an N-scale layout. Yep, I have an N-scale layout in there. And I've done many videos on that, so please go check that out. And as you can see, a lot of the trees are now fall colored, as I had mentioned earlier, because we're further north. But this section here is the first section I built for this entire layout. This section was built before the Great Lakes Eastern was even a thing. Okay? This was built as a simple little oval track in my bedroom of a place that I love to go. So this way I always had it with me. And I did not know at the time, and I was like 16 at the time, that this was going to turn into that. But hey, we all start somewhere, right? Got a train coming by. All right, I'm on the other side of the furnace now, and we are at the Agua Canyon Park. Now, this is the newest section to the layout. so it's kind of sparse. I need to add a couple more buildings and picnic areas and walking trails and tons and tons and tons of trees. And then get a little bit of the canyon here in the corner. And this is the northernmost point of the layout. That's the tour train parked there. I had no idea this video was going to be this long, but it's a full tour. And then here we're coming back to Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. And you can kind of see some of those scratch-built houses that I made in the early 2000s. This is the house right here that I lived in. And then these were the neighbors. All scratch-built. Well, folks, that's it. We made it all the way around, so I hope you stuck it out and enjoyed this tour. Please comment below and let me know what you thought, and if you have any questions, let me know. And as always, everybody, thank you very much for watching, subscribing, pushing that like button. You know the drill. All right. Well, until next time, everybody, take care. Bye for now.